All right. Good evening. Buenas noches.
Buenas noches.
A todos. Esta noche, nosotros. No, well, come on.
Subtitles, please.
We got Yehuda got me going. Okay, so Daf Yomi for the week is sponsored by Yishai and Rebecca Schwartz. Leili Nishmas Yishai's grandfather, Nachman ben Avram Shloimi, was your site was on the 1st of Teves. We continue on the Boxing Day edition of Daf Yomi. That's Canadians. That's right, for Canadian Boxing Day.
Why don't you?
So we also when I first came, the Boxing Day I thought was called Boxing because that's when you put your gifts back in the box. Bring it back to the store in order to return it. That's correct. It could be. Yeah. It's not really, but okay. Says the Gemara, Mike Amar, what is this Mishnah talking about? This Mishnah, on the one hand, said a couple of contradictory things. It says that if you've got a pot that you have made the kodshe kodshim in it, and you've also made kodshe kalim in it, so then the flavors from the kodshe kodshim are going to get absorbed into the kodshe kalim, and now you've got to consider your kodshe kalim more severe, like kodshe kodshim. Then we said that it doesn't transmit tuma like kodshe kodshim. So in some ways, it's like kodshe kodshim. Some ways, it's not. What is going on in this Mishnah? Mike Amar, what is going on in this Mishnah? In yesh bahen, but no Saint Tom, if the flavors are in fact imparted to this meat, then it would be that the lenient meat, the kodshe kalim, are going to be consumed. You're going to have to consume them like the kodshe kodshim. We said, remember the distinction is that you have to eat kodshe kodshim in the azara, right? So there's rules about that. And also, you only have one day and one night. Also, they can only be eaten by male kohanim. So there's a lot of stringencies that come with this kodshe kodshim. And now this kodshe kalim, you took this piece of shlomim meat and you cooked it in that container. Now you got to treat it that way. So utu'unin marika ushtifa, and not only that, you're going to have to do marika ushtifa. Now, we had an argument whether that was universal, right? Whether that might have been something you needed to do for kodshe kodshim and kodshe kalim anyway. But if it was chulin, you wouldn't need to do marika ushtifa, but you have to do this marika ushtifa. Uposlin b'maga, also if they become puzzle, if the chamor item was puzzle as a korban, let's say this ola was a puzzle ola. Now the flavor got imparted into the utensil, and now it comes out of the utensil into this kosher korban. That korban now is considered puzzle because it has been absorbed with the flavors from the puzzle korban. Ain bahem benosein. So then. If does impart flavor, then all of that is the case.
Would you have to wash it out very well before you get?
You gotta do like we suggested, right? You've got to do hagala and you got to do marika ushtifa. This is what happens if you didn't. So now we've got a problem. Ein bahem benosin tam. If it doesn't impart flavor, ein hakol necholin kachamurin. Then this is what the Mishnah means. Then if it doesn't impart the flavor, then the other side is that it doesn't have to be eaten like the strict one. Ve'ein tonin marika ushtifa. It doesn't need to have marika ushtifa anymore. Also ve'ein poslin b'maga. It doesn't become puzzle by touching touching the flavors of the puzzle korban. So it doesn't apply. Okay, so nehi de kodshe kodshim lobo. So fine, we said that kodshe kodshim. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to do marika ushtifa because it doesn't impart any flavor. But kodshe kalim, niboi, so why wouldn't you have to do marika ushtifa? At the very least, the other korban that you're cooking in here is kodshe kalim, and we had suggested that kodshe kalim still is required to have marika ushtifa at the conclusion of its eating consumption period. So Amar Rabbi says, my ein te'unin ka'amar, kodshe kodshim. About kodshe kalim to unim. What it means is that it doesn't need marika ushtifa. Just means it doesn't need marika ushtifa after the time passes for the consumption of the kodshe kodshim. Remember that kodshe kodshim have 1 day and 1 night. Kodshe kalim, the shlomim, not all of them, but the shlomim has a day and has 2 days and 1 night. Mm-hmm. So therefore, it means it doesn't need marika ushtifa at the conclusion of the 1 day and 1 night period. You can wait until the marika ushtifa period that shlomim has. Rava says Hamani. He says no. Whose opinion this? This is Rabbi Shimon. This is Rabbi Shimon's opinion. We learned yesterday. Damar Kachim Kalim into Marika Shtifa. He says that Kodshe Kalim don't need Marika Shtifa. That was his opinion because he learns also to exclude Truma and Kodshe Kalim do not require We said the truma is excluded, but everything else does require Marika Shtifa. He said no. He said Osa was taught for something else. Therefore, when the pasuk says Kache Kachim, only Kache Kachim require Marika Shtifa, but Kache Kalim do not. Bishlama l'Rava, fine. I understand Rava's perspective because Kache Kachim v'Kache Kalim, right? Because the pasuk says, right. Either you cooked kachim and chulin, or you cooked kachim with kachim kalim. Those were two cases. So therefore, Rabbi Shimon is saying those cases have the same halacha, right? Since you don't need marik ushtifa for chulin, for non-kachim, and you don't need marik ushtifa by kachim kalim, so therefore this is going to either need it, depending if it imparts flavors, or not need it if it doesn't impart flavors from the kachim. El Abaye tartalamali. But according to Abaye, why does he need two cases? Because at the end of the day, right, when you cook kachim and chulim, and also when you cook kachim and kachim kalim, right? So we said once we decided that the more strict one doesn't impart flavor to the less strict one, there's nothing new to this, right? Kachim doesn't impart flavor to chulin. Kachim kalim doesn't impart flavor to the kachim kalim. Also, of course, it doesn't change its stringency. So the answer is no, trichi. It isn't quite the same, because the tana kachim v'chulin. If the Mishnah had only said that this is the rule by kachim and chulin, that if you cooked chulin in this pot that was kachim, havamina chulin hu demevatli kachim. I might think that chulin is a different thing than kachim, right? We had this issue of nullification, if you remember a couple of prakim ago. If they were two different items, then one can nullify the other. Chulin is different inherently than kachim. And so therefore, delav minayhu, it's not the same type. Therefore, you might presume that you need to have the taste imparted from the kachim into the chulin in order for it to invalidate the chulin and require mariku shtifa. Aval kachim v'kachim kalim, but maybe kachim and kachim kalim, they're both kachim. So imalo, I might say no, they're the same type, and therefore it would have a different halacha. Right? Potentially we said that min b'mino eno batal, right? Maybe it doesn't nullify. And if it's not nullified, then according to Yehuda say, even if it's not nullified, so then you need to have mariko shtifa on this regardless of whether it imparted flavor. So v'itana kachik kachim v'kachik kalim. Now if it had only told me the case about the kachik kachim kalim, havamina kachim hu de alimi livetule kachim, I might have thought that, you know why the nullification exists? Because kachim kalim have their own strength, there's something significant. So therefore they can come and nullify the kachim, and that's why that works. Aval chulin, but when it comes to chulin cannot nullify kachim. Emalo, it would not work. So tzricha, so I need both cases. I might not have presumed that the nullification could work. Okay, so now that's how we explain the Mishnah in a couple of ways. The Mishnah next said, Rokik shenogak barogik. Right? We had the case, two wafers come in contact with each other. Okay? So you don't have to throw away the entire wafer. Right? You know, the mixture is, one is puzzle, one is not, one is kachim. The whole thing is not a mixture, right? Liquids can all mix together. But solids do not. Only the part that touched, that's the part you have to get rid of.
Wafer, tell me, the chocolate or the vanilla?
Well, don't mix different things.
Yeah.
Tame, right? Chocolate and vanilla, right? The issue of milchiks and fleischiks, which is the chocolate we discussed with the chicken last night. That's milchiks and fleischiks. This is tuba and tara, which is applicable. It doesn't have to be chocolate, right? It just means somebody touches. Okay, fine. Tana Rabban, Rabbi sword. Kol asher yiga, right? Anybody who touches, when it comes to korban chatos, anybody who touches it, bivsara yikdash, will become kodesh. So yachol afilu shelo bala, you might think that something touches another item, then it becomes kodesh, even if it doesn't absorb the flavors from the chatos. So if I've got a piece of chatos meat, it touches a piece of non-chatos meat, a piece of regular steak. So then, says the pasuk, it becomes kodesh. The regular meat becomes kodesh too. You might think that has nothing to do with absorption of flavors. Maybe that's just the transfers, like tuma, right? I touch it, it becomes tameh, right? I touch a chatos to another piece of meat, it becomes a chatos. So the Talmud Lomar, biv sarah. Therefore, the pasuk says it goes into the flesh. The reason why it becomes a korban is because it gets into the taste gets absorbed in the flesh. Ad sheyibla biv sarah. The flavor has to get absorbed into the meat in order for that meat to become achatos and also become kodesh. Yachol naga b'miktas chaticha yehekulo pasul. I might think that what if only part of the meat touches this tip, touches the end tip, so then maybe the whole thing, yehekulo pasul, the entire thing can become pasul now. So Talmud Lomar, therefore it says, hanogeya pasul, that which it touches becomes pasul. So ha-ketzad, how does that work? Chotech es makom shebala. You have to cut off the place where the absorption likely takes place. Biv sarah, because the pasuk says, right, it says it goes into the meat. Velo bagidin, this does not apply to sinews. They are not absorbent. They're tough and chewy and they don't absorb. Velo be'atzamos, not the bones either. Velo be'karnayim, velo be'talafayim, not the horns, not the hooves. Yikdash, then the pasuk says, right, Yikdash, it shall become kodesh, lios kamoha. The halacha now becomes that the meat that got touched has the same halacha as the chatos piece. Ha-ketzad, how does that work? Im psulahi, if this chatos was a chatos psula, ti pasel. So now it's going to make this piece of meat a pasul piece of meat as well. Vim kesherahi, if the chatos is kosher, teachel kachamor sheba, you just have to eat it with the restrictions of the chatos that is in it. That it has to be eaten by a male kohen in the Beis HaMikdash within a certain time period. Okay, now, the question we have to ask is, if it's pasul, that it becomes pasul. The Gemara wants to know, amai, why is it, right, when you've got meat of a shlamim, right, it's perfectly good shlamim, touches a chatos which is pasul, now the shlamim becomes pasul. Why? We have a principle generally throughout all of Shas, or the Torah tells us, that a positive commandment nullifies a negative commandment. If you're in a situation where the Torah tells you don't do something, but then you're also told to do something, the positive commandment outweighs the negative commandment. Obviously, there are restrictions to that. It has to be that you can't possibly perform the positive command, you can't possibly perform the positive command without violating the negative command. If you can do both, that's the best, right? But if you're in a circumstance, you can only, so here's where we are, right? So you've got this meat that's a shlomim. If you eat it, you're consuming something, lo saseh, you're not allowed to eat this pasul chatos. But you also have a positive commandment to eat the shlomim, right? The pasuk says in Shmos, Chaf Tes Lamed Gimel, ve'achlu osam, you shall eat them, these korbanos. And then the lo saseh is not to eat kachim psulim, which is lo ye'achel ki kodeshu. So you've got one pasuk says you to eat it, one pasuk says don't eat it. So why are you not eating it? Positive commandment wins out. So
to make it equal, you have half now and half tomorrow.
Then you have other problems with no sir problems. Don't do that, Yehuda. So Amar Rava says something very interesting. He says, "In asay docha los asay sheba migdash." This rule of asay pushes off a los asay doesn't exist in the Beis HaMikdash, right? So this is an exception, another one of these kodshim exceptions to the rules of Shas, right? You cannot say positive pushes off a negative in the Beis HaMikdash. That doesn't work. Shenamar, as the pasuk says, ve'etzem lo sishberuvo. When it comes to the Korban Pesach, you're supposed to consume all of the meat, but you're also not allowed to break any bones. So now, Rabbi Shimon ben Menashe Omer, Rabbi Shimon ben Menashe says, "Echad etzem sheyesh bo moach ve'echad etzem she'ein bo moach." What if you've got some marrow inside the bone? The only way to get to it is to break the bone and scoop out the marrow. So you're not allowed to eat that. You're not allowed to break the bone in order to get to the marrow. Amai, why is that? The positive commandment of requiring you to eat the meat should result in you being allowed to violate the negative commandment of breaking the bone. So Ella in asay adocha los asay shebamigdash. The answer is, when it comes to kachim, positive commandments don't outweigh negative commandments. Okay, so that's the rule. Okay, so now Rav Ashi has another answer to why a positive commandment doesn't push off the negative commandment. Rav Ashi says yikdosh, right? The pasuk says that anything that touches the meat, it shall become kodesh. Yikdosh asehu. He says that is actually a positive commandment in itself. The fact that the chatos turns the shlomim into a pasul, that it shall be consecrated as pasul, is itself a positive. So that means that if you consume the shlamim, you're not only you're satisfying the positive commandment of eating the shlomim, but you're violating the negative of not eating pasol and violating a positive as well of sanctifying it. So ve'ein aseh docha es lo saseh v'aseh. Whereas, generally speaking, a positive commandment can push off a negative commandment, a positive commandment cannot push off another positive commandment together with a negative commandment. 2 against 1, you cannot push off.
2 wrong, don't make it right this time.
One wrong and 2 rights.
Yeah.
Right, 2 wrong and 1 right, right? So that you cannot violate. A wrong and a right is not overtaken by 1 right. Okay, fine. Now, the Gemara says, Yikdash, we learned from Yikdash that the meat that was a chatos touches the meat from another korban or even chulin, that new piece of meat acquires the characteristics of the korban, of the chatos. Okay, so now, the Gemara wants to know, Ashkechan chatos de miskadish bebalua, we have found, right, the pasuk that's the source for this was by a korban chatos. So we have found this rule that the absorbed flavors from the chatos transfers over to the other piece of meat, right? Shar kodshim minolan. How do I know that works by other korbanos? So Amar Shmuel, Mishum Rabbi Eliezer, Shmuel says name Rabbi Eliezer, Zos HaTorah, this is the rule, La'ola v'la mincha v'la chatos v'la asham v'la miluim v'la zevach hashlamim. Right? This is the rule. By all of these korbanos. All of these korbanos are tied together, and the connection to the chatos is that they have the same rule. They have the same rule that they can transfer their kedusha from one piece to the next, anything that they touch. Okay, so now, la'ola. So let's go through all the different korbanos and all the different things that are learned from each of the words of that statement. So first la'ola, so we said ki ola. So we're going to learn from each of these different korbanos that there's a rule that applies by this korban, which now applies by all the korbanos, because this pasuk compares all of the psukim together, all of the korbanos together. So first, for olah, what is significant about the olah? We have to say that all of them have the din of an olah. Ma olah t'una kli, just like the olah requires that, just like the olah requires a utensil. So afkol t'una kli. Also, all of the offerings require a utensil. So my kli, what are we talking about? What's the requirement of the utensil? Ilema mizrak, if you're talking about that we learned that we need a bowl in order to catch the blood when you do shchita, so that's b'shamei tzibur nami ksiv behu. That can't be that's not a rule that's only by an olah. That is a rule that is also written by a korban shlomim. Pasuk says, "Vayikach Moshe chatzi hadam vayasem ba'aganos." This pasuk is by talking about both the olos and the shlamim that they brought. I believe this is by the Yemei Miluim, right? And it says over there that they brought these korbanos, right? They placed the blood in these containers. And so you see that the shlamim was also placed in containers. So that's not a unique halacha by an olah. Ella sakin. What we're learning is the knife, right? You need a knife in order to shecht an olah. Therefore, that's the rule by all the korbanos. You need a knife in order to do shchita on all the korbanos. Okay? The olah gufa minol, and how do I know by an olah itself that that's the halacha? Dichsiv, the pasuk says, "Vayishlach Avraham es yado vayikach es hamacheles." Right? The source is Akedas Yitzchak. Right? Yitzchak was an olah, and so Avram went to grab the knife. V'hasam olahu, he was an olah.
Then there was a goat right to a tree.
That ram, but but we stopped him. But nevertheless, that was you needed. It says clearly in the pasuk, he needed a knife, right? Vayaleu la'olah tachas beno. He brought the ram instead of his son as an olah. So therefore, Yitzchak was an olah, needed a knife. Then we learn from there to all of the other korbanos. Okay, as interesting how that pasuk that talks about all the lamiluim called korbaneho, right? That's we sing that before Musaf on we sing this pasuk before Musaf on Yom Tovim, right? Mm-hmm. This is telling us that what they did was this is the rule of all their korbanos that they were sanctifying the mizbeach with bringing one type of each of these korbanos. So okay, so now we're going to say so that's the rule of olah. Now it applies to all their korbanos from this pasuk. Mincha. Let's go to the next one. What's the rule by mincha that now applies to all the korbanos? Ma mincha eina necheles ela lezichrei kahuna. Just like a korban mincha, it can only be consumed. It's kachim can only be consumed by male kohanim, not their wives, no women. Av kol einam ne'achel ela zichrei kahuna. So too, all of their korbanos can only be eaten by men, not by women. So now, Maihi, which korbanos are we talking about here? Because that's not true of all of the korbanos. Ichatas ve'osham. If you're going to tell me that it's teaching me that that rule applies to a chatas and osham, excuse me, I still have to get rid of this. Still working on it. Behedjik sibahu.
One day.
Right, behedjik sibahu. That's written explicitly right in those psukim. Kol zachar b'kohanim yochlenu. That only male kohanim are able to eat a chatos and an osham. Can't have.
What do the women eat then? What do they eat?
They can have vegetables. Salads. Well, ladies can have a nice corn noodle salad. No, but this is only that they can eat whatever they want. They just can't eat a chatos, right? They can't eat this meat. They can, the kohen has to bring home other meats from the store, right? They can eat hamburgers, but they can't eat. Right, but they can't eat the chatos.
Right.
Okay. Ve'i shall make tzibor, if it's going to tell me the shlomim from the tzibor, so me ribuya dekroy osi. That also is learned from extra words in the psukim, right? But it says, "Ba'kodesh hakadashim tochlenu," that by the meat, the chaza and the shok that goes to the kohanim, that has to be eaten from the korban tzibor. It has to be eaten in the kodesh hakadashim in the holy places. Kol zachar yochel oso, has to be eaten by males. Again, males are supposed to do it. So therefore, right, where else are we going to learn this from? Shlomim, that's not even the rule. Shlomim yachid is not even the rule. So how we're going to learn from yochel oso that the kohanim are supposed to eat it? What's this teaching us? So the answer is Tanaihi. It's machlokas. It's machlokas tanoim on that point. So ika denafka le mehacha, vika denafka le mehacha. Some learn it from that source, and some learn it from this source. So that's what the purpose of Mincha is, from that source. Okay. Next, chatos. In this list, it lists the korban chatos, tells us a rule of chatos, applies to other korbanos. Shma chatos mikadeshes bebalua. That's our rule that we're teaching right now. Just like a chatos can transfer the kedusha of a chatos over to another piece of meat by coming in contact with that meat and having its flavor absorbed into that other piece of meat. Afkol mikadeshes bebalua. So too, that's the rule by all korbanos. Any korban touches another piece of meat, that other piece of meat can absorb its flavor and its kodesh status. Maybe even a piece of bread. Could also, right? As long as it absorbs into it.
As long as the bread doesn't contain any dairy in it.
That's correct. Then we have bigger problems.
Or meat in it.
Or meat in it. That's also, but slightly lesser problems. Right. Durabanan problems.
Right.
Okay. Asham. Then we had the next one. This is the rule by the Asham. What is the Asham? Ma Asham ein shapir vishilya kadosh bo. Right? So, when it comes to the fetus that's inside an asham can be a female animal, right? So if you have a fetus inside the animal, the skin and the skin of the hide of the animal, the fetus, and the shilya, the placenta that are inside the mother, so they're not kodesh, right? Right. So. Oh no, I'm sorry. It's only male. That's the point, right? An asham's only male. So therefore, since it's impossible for you to have a fetus, that's the point, right? An asham is male, so it's impossible for it to have a fetus. Therefore, that rule applies to all the korbanos, even where you have a korban that can be female, right? Asham. What is it supposed to say? Yeah, male, right? Asham. Ashams are exclusively male. So therefore we learn from there that just like an asham, which is exclusively male, you can never have a fetus, therefore you can never have the parts of a fetus be kodesh. Therefore, we're going to learn that to all the other korbanos where you can have female animals, if they are pregnant, the offspring inside are not, the elements of the offspring inside are not kodesh. That's what we're going to learn from there. Afkol ein shaper v'shilya kadosh bo. Kasavar. So now, from this brisa, from the fact that it says that the shapir and the shilya, right, that's the hide and the placenta are not. So you might have thought that vlodos kodshim behavyosam heim kodshim, that the fetuses themselves that are born from a korban are not kodesh in the womb of their mothers. They become kodesh when they are born, right? If you have a korban chatos and then it gives birth to a child, an offspring, then that child, the offspring, is kodesh. But before it's born, it's not. Right?
How long do you have to wait before you offer the offspring, the child? How long do you have to wait once the baby's born before you offer
8 days. 8 days. That's a rule by korbanos.
It's like a bris.
Yeah, well, only very different.
Right. Same amount of days as
Right.
Exactly
Yes.
the same, but different.
Yes.
Same amount of days.
But the days is the same. Is that is point, right? You have to wait till it's 8 days old in the sense, because then you know that the animal is a live animal, right? By human beings, we wait 30 days, right? That's why we do
Before the
pigeon
bris?
before a pigeon a ben, for example, right? Bris as a separate. That's why I'm saying it's different, because by the way, it's a matter of establishing that that this is a living creature, right? So by animals, they develop faster. So. V'donan efshar mi efshar. The other thing is you have to hold of this rule of that we can learn one rule from another rule, despite that in one circumstance it's impossible, in the other circumstance it is possible. We're basically learning that from the fact that an usham can't become pregnant because it's male, therefore we learn that even a female animal that becomes pregnant is also not kodesh. Right? So we're learning a case of where it is possible from circumstances where it is impossible, and that's our drush. Okay, so you have to hold that way in order to have that drush work.
Interesting.
Then the pasuk continues. And it says miluim. Right? This is the rules of the miluim. And that means that these are talking about these korbanos that were brought during the 7 days that they were consecrating the Mishkan. And setting it up. Ma miluim mosreim besreifa. So just like the rule by the korbanos hamiluim, anything that was left over from the meat was burned in fire. Right? How do you know that? Because the pasuk says, they don't bring the pasuk here, the pasuk says, V'im yivaser mibsar hamiluim, any meat that was left over from the miluim, umin alechem ad haboker, and from the bread until the morning, v'saraftas anosar ba'esh. You have to burn the leftovers in fire. Lo ye'achel ki kodeshu, cannot be consumed. It is kodesh. Ve'ein balich. The other thing about miluim is ein balich chayim b'mosreihem. Also, the any animal that's still alive is not considered to be leftover, right? Because there was no leftover live animals, right? The korbanos, they were all korbanos tzibur, and so there's no achrayas taken, right? So afko mosreihem b'sreifa. So too, when it comes to all korbanos, the halacha of their leftover meat, right, till the morning that does not get consumed has to get burned. Vein bali chayim b'mosreihem. Now, if an individual, right, he separates two korbanos, right? One is his backup. He says, I have my one korban, I'm supposed to bring a korban olah. This is my olah. This is my backup, right? If I don't bring this one, I have to bring the other one. So if he brings left over, he doesn't have to burn the second one. It's still alive. So it's not nosar. That doesn't make it an olah that's left over. He can still bring it as a korban olah later if he wants, right? So it's not left over while it's still alive. And we learn from the miluim to all the korbanos that is a law by all the korbanos. Next is shlomim on the list. The Zos Torah comes to shlomim. Ma shlomim mifaglin. Just like when it comes to shlomim, you can make pigol. All of those laws, all of those psukim we learned all that time ago about how pigol operates are written by shlomim. Mispaglin. Also, the items, the nesachim, the wine that comes with it can become pigol through the korban. Afkol mifaglin and mispaglin. So too, that's the rule by all korbanos. You can also make pigol by all the korbanos. Okay. The connection, further limud from the fact that we connect all the korbanos to a mincha. B'masnisa tana mishmei Rabbi Akiva. In Brisa, we learned in the name of Rabbi Akiva that mincha. What's the purpose of putting mincha in this list? Ma mincha mikadeshes bebalua, afko mikadeshes bebalua. Just like a mincha will transfer its kedusha by absorption, so too all of them will be able to transfer the kedusha through absorption from one to the other. Now, we just learned the exact same halacha from the chatos. That was the point of writing chatos, was to tell me about the absorption. So why would I need to write it by mincha and by chatos then? So that's the Gemara's next point. V'yitzrich lemichtav mincha, v'yitzrich lemichtav chatos. I need to teach this law both by mincha and by chatos. Why? The iyashmin on mincha. If you tell me about the meal offerings, the mincha offerings. So da'idi dirakiva dirakicha mibloi, because they're soft, they're absorbent, they're bread, right? They basically absorb very well. Aval chatos emalo, but I would say meat is not the same way. Meat doesn't quite absorb in the same way. So therefore, the pasuk has to tell me same rule applies by chatos. V'yashmin and chatos. If the Torah only told me that absorption works by chatos, mishum de karir, because it's very oily, right? It has a lot of fat on it, so and the fat goes deep in it. Aval mincha imalo, but not the case by the bread. So therefore, there would be rationale to think that one might be more absorbent than the other in either case. So therefore, tzrich, I need both cases. The Torah tells me in both cases the absorption principle is effective. Okay, there's another potential limud, another potential thing we can learn from the fact that chatos is on this list, and that is chatos, ma chatos ena ba ela min achulin, just like a korban chatos can only be a chatos if the animal that is being selected is a unconsecrated animal from before. If you have an animal, right, you have meiser, we have meiser sheni, right? Meiser sheni, you have to take a 10%. First, you remember we have to take, whenever you go grow crops in Eretz Yisrael, you take off truma, give it to the kohen, take off meiser rishon, give it to the Levi, and then on some years you take meiser sheni, you keep that yourself in Yerushalayim. Sometimes you give meiser ani, which you give to the poor. Meiser sheni produce it has to be eaten in Yerushalayim. You don't actually have to take the produce. You can transfer that produce onto money, bring the money to Yerushalayim and buy food there. Okay, so now this guy decides, I'm going to buy myself an animal. And he buys an animal with the money, and he figures he's going to go now have a barbecue with the animal when he gets to Yerushalayim. So he brings the animal to Yerushalayim, and he says, hey, you know what, it's Meiser Sheni, I'd like to bring it as a korban. Cannot do that. Pasuk says that. He says that you're not going to be allowed to bring a korban chatos from an animal unless the animal is completely unconsecrated. This animal is already semi-consecrated. It has Meiser Sheni principles on it. So therefore, since it already has restrictions, you cannot turn that into a chatos, right? We're going to learn that later on. That's going to be a halacha we're going to learn later on. Uvayom, also, the korban chatos only can be brought during the day, not at night. Ubeyodo hayemanis, also all of the service of the avoda of the korban chatos has to be done with his right hand. Afkol, this is now the rule by all korbanos. We took some of these things for granted that this is right by all the korbanos. This is where the source is. Afkol enaba ela min achulin, also all korbanos. You cannot take an animal that's already pre-consecrated in some way. You can't use meiser sheni produce in order to be able to consecrate on a meiser sheni animal to bring your korban. And also, bayom has to be done during the day, ubiyodo yamanis, with your right hand. So chatos minon, what's the source for this? From chatos, Amar Rav Chisda, Amar Kro, the Rav Chisda, the pasuk says, v'ikriv Aaron es para chatas shalo, right? That Aaron had to make a bull offering of a chatos on Yom Kippur, and the animal had to be asher lo, his, mishalo v'lo mishal tzibor. It had to be his personal animal, not a community purchase. V'lo mishal meiser.
It was on Yom Kippur. That means it had to be covered all up because they couldn't eat on Yom Kippur.
No, because we said, remember that a chatos, the internal chatos, was not eaten, right? It was taken out to a place where it was burned. The chatos that was on Yom Kippur was not eaten.
Because everyone, they were fasting that day.
Yeah, but remember, if the Torah told us to eat it, we would eat it, right? But the Torah doesn't. The bottom line is the Torah says don't eat this korban. It has, right? It's not don't eat it because it's Yom Kippur. It's that this internal, a korban, the parim that are brought inside the heichal are never eaten, right? Okay. Bayom, what's the source for the fact that korban chatos has to be brought during the day, which then we teach that to all other korbanos? Bayom tzavoso nafka. The pasuk says, on the day that it was commanded. Right? This is by the end of the parsha of korbanos that it says that this is the rule of the korbanos on the day that it was commanded. And kedei nasba. This is really This is really a rule about all korbanos, right? Because this is the end. This is not talking about a chatas at all. That pasuk, that talking about all of the korbanos on the day that they were commanded. So therefore, really, he says, K'dei Nasba, the Tana is being inaccurate. The Tana says, what's the purpose of Chatos? To teach us these rules. But it's really not true, because that the Pasuk B'Yom Tzavaso applies to all the Korbanos anyway. It really doesn't come from Chatos. It's just that the Tana will sometimes throw in, he says, these are the drashas, we're learning it from somewhere, he says, and also the fact that it's during the days also comes from Chatos. But it's not accurate. K'dei Nasba means it's not really, the Tana is not being accurate. Then biyodo hayimonis, it has to be done with his right hand. Mida Rabba bar Chana nafka. That we learn like the teaching of Rabba bar Nachman. Dama Rabba bar Chana. Rabba bar Chana says, Amar Reish Lakish, Reish Lakish. Kol makom shenemar etzba. Whenever the Torah, we've had this before. Whenever the Torah uses the word finger, like for example, when the Kohen says by the Korban Chatos v'lakach haKohen mi dama be'etzbo, he takes from its blood with his finger. Ukehuna, and also when the Torah uses the word Kohen, Kohanim, talks about Kohanim, Eno Ella Yamin. It means the right hand. You have to use the right hand in order to do that service. Okay, so now, that rule, right, again, it's not really from Chatos. That's just his general statement. Rabbi Bar Chana says, this is the rule. Whenever you see the word Kohen, whenever you see the word Yah, whenever you see the word Etzba, it means right hand. Remember we had talked about whether you need to see both or one or whatever. So, okay, fine. So the answer is, again, K'dei Nasba. He's being inaccurate. The Tana is not really being accurate. It's not really from Chatos that we were in that. It's that there is a drush also that tells us that you need to have all the korbanos with your right hand. V'iboy, say where else if you want to say. Savara Rabbi Shimon, he's holding like Rabbi Shimon, Da'amar Etzba lo boy kahuna. Right, whenever the word etzba is written, you don't need the word kahuna next to it. It automatically means right hand, right? Even if you don't write the word kohen with it. Kahuna by etzba. But if you write the word kahuna, if you write kohen by it, that doesn't necessarily mean you need a right hand, unless the word etzba is written there also, right? So you need both of those things, because in the pasuk by the Chatos it says v'lakach haKohen midama chatos be'etzba'o. The Kohen is taking the blood with his finger. So it says Kohen there and it says etzba there. That's why it needs to be on the right hand, right? If it just said Kohen without the word etzba, you wouldn't know that. But if you had the word etzba by itself, also you would know that. Okay, next asham. Why is the word asham listed here? What's this asham telling us? Ma'asham atzmosav mutarin afkol otzmosav mutarin. A korban asham, you're allowed to make utensils out of the bones of the animal, right? The skin, right? Skins of these animals get given to Kohanim often in cases, and the bones they're not kodesh anymore. Once the fats are burned and the meat is consumed, so the bones are fine. What we're learning from here is that you might think in Ola, since the entire meat and everything is burned, you also have to burn the bones as well. The answer is no. From Asham we learn that even in Ola, the bones are fine. You can save the bones and use the bones for whatever you want. There's no kedusha to the bones. Amar Rava says, pshitali, it is obvious to me, dam chatos lamata v'dam ola lamala, that if you've got blood of a chatos that falls onto a garment, right, and then you've got an ola blood that falls on top of it, right? We're back to our issue of washing the blood, right? So we know that the blood of a chatos has to get washed off. What if you have a stain of a chatos? You don't have to wash off a stain of an ola. What if the ola blood splashes on top of it? So the answer is tan kibus. That for sure needs to be washed, right? Because the blood of the chatos was there first. So you've got to get that. Boi Rava says, my question is, dam ola lamata v'dam chatos lamala. What if you first splash ola blood? And then the chatos blood splashes on top of that. Mahu, what will be the halach of that? Mishum nogeyahu, v'hanogeya. Is it the fact that the blood touches the garment and the chatos blood is now touching the garment? O dilma mishum baluahu, v'halobola. Or is it that it has to become absorbed into the garment, and this blood is less absorbed, I suppose, because it's already saturated by the ola blood in that location? So Hadar Pashta, he then later on came to the conclusion, De'ein tu'unin kibus, does not need to be washed. If it was dirty already from ola blood, then chatas blood splashing on it does not need to be washed off. Okay. Amar Rava says, Pshitali, right, it's also obvious to me, Dam al bigdo, if you have blood that becomes, let's say you have a garment that becomes tameh, right? And now you're going to go to the base. This is not a Kohen Gadol's garment or Kohen's garment. Somebody's got a garment that is tameh, right? Was worn by a nida or something like that. And now she wants to make it tahar. She has to bring it to a mikvah, put it in the water, right? So now if blood is on the garment, right? Chotzitz, that blood is a chatzitza. It's an interruption because the water has to get onto the utensil. The utensil is not clean. That's why when we bring kalim to the mikveh, you got to worry about the glue on the sticker and all that stuff. That stuff intercedes between. You got to worry about that. V'im tabachu. Now, if, however, he is a butcher, in which case blood is just part of his garment, right? Then eno chotzitz is not a chatzitza. Right? He doesn't care. Why? Because what the definition of a chatzitza is, that it has to be something that people mind having, right? If I have a blue shirt, the blue dye is obviously not a chatzitza, right? That's because it's part of the shirt. I want it there, right? So this guy's a butcher. He walks into his job every day covered with splashes of blood. It doesn't matter to him. So therefore, it's not a chatzitza. Okay, so now, Rav Revav al Bigdo. Let's say he's got fats. He's got fat onto his, or like oil or whatever it is on his garment that became tamei. Chotzitz. That's a chatzitza. That's going to be a intercept. That's going to stop it from being able to be dunked in the mikvah. The imocher revavhu. If he is a seller of rendered fats. Right, he's a chicken schmaltz salesman. There's always a story about the chicken schmaltz salesman, right? There's always that, right? Isn't that a story it's like one of the Hasidic Shemaises? There's always a king, there's always a wagon driver, and a chicken schmaltz salesman. I don't write my stories, okay? So anyway, that is, since he's not makbid, it's not a chatzitza. Okay. Boy Rava asks the following question. Sorry. Dam urevav al bigdo. He's got blood and he's got fat on his garment. Mahu. So what's the halacha? So im tabachu, if he's a butcher, right? He doesn't care about the blood. Tepukli mishum ravav. So there's a chatzitza because of the oil. V'mocha ravavu, if he's an oil salesman, tepukli mishum dam, then it's going to be problematic because of the blood, right? So what's his question, right? The answer is lo tzricha da'avid havaha. The answer is he's got a day job and a night job, right? The guy's day job is a butcher. At night he sells oil, right? So now what's the halacha here? Do we say he's got one garment? He's one guy. He doesn't care about either of them, or you put on your suit and tie when you go to work in the morning, and then at night you put on your skates and your gym clothes and your hockey coach. It's a different job, different clothes. So, right? Achada lo kapid atarte kapid. He doesn't care about blood when he's doing when he's doing blood. He's got blood, fine. When he's doing oil, he doesn't mind about the oil. But he would mind about both things on the garment. There's never certain thing he would mind both.
If the oil spills, it's going to help him skate even better.
So, yeah, so that was an example. So, don't get caught up in my example. Dilma, or else atarti nami lo kapid. He doesn't care. Right. The bottom line is he's used to getting splashed with blood. He's used to getting splashed with oil. Doesn't bother him. So teku, not quite sure. Hadrunach dam chatos, hadrunach dam chatos, hadrunach dam chatos. And that concludes Parak the 11th.
Beautiful. Oh, switching stick.
We move on.
Sperm now.
Switching scared there.
We thought we were packing up for that. Oh no.
No, we got time. We got time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And a new parak, new topic. Tvul Yom. Okay, now we're talking about distributing the pieces of the korbanos to the kohanim. Okay, so how the distribution who gets it and who doesn't get it, what invalidates you from getting it. A tvul yom, right? Somebody was tamei, a kohen was tamei, he went to the mikveh today. So the halacha is that he stays tamei today, he becomes tahor at nightfall. Right, as we learned in Mesechus Brachos, that is what's going on there. The Kohanim were tamei; they dunked in the mikvah. At the moment that they're no longer tvul yom, they can go in to eat their truma. That's when they are no longer tvul yom. So this guy's a tvul yom. Umechusar kippurim, or if he has not brought his korbanos yet. So he is somebody who had tsaras, for example. And he's a zav, for example, and he's got part of his purification process is he's got korbanos to bring. So he's going to bring those korbanos tomorrow morning. Today, he's not tamei anymore. He's already completed his waiting, the days of waiting that he had, but he hasn't brought his korbanos yet. He cannot eat kachem. So, einon cholkin bekachem. If they're kohanim, they do not get a portion. Right? They can't walk into the base of mikdash and say, "Hey, I'll be ready to eat it tomorrow. I can eat it tonight. Can I have some meat now?" No. If you're not eligible to eat now, you cannot get your portion now. Okay? You cannot you cannot take some now in order to eat it tonight. Onain, right? An onain is somebody who has a relative who passes away, a close relative who passes away before the burial or the day of the death of the person. So So that person, a nogeya, so he can touch kodshim. He's not tamei, right? He didn't, unless of course he becomes tamei from becoming close to the mace, right? But this guy, just because, right, he found out he's got a relative who died, he's not tamei. He's prohibited from doing any service in the Beis HaMikdash
To the funeral.
until we're going to see that's going to be the question at what point it drops off, right? So the eno makriv. So he is not going to transfer any tuma. He can touch korbanos, but he cannot do the service. He's illegal to do the service. Also eno cholik, right? He cannot lechol le'erev. He cannot get a piece now in order to eat it tonight. Bali mumin, a kohen who has a blemish. Bein Bali mumin ovrin. It doesn't matter whether the blemish is a passing blemish, right? They got a cut or something that has to heal, right? Doesn't matter. Bein Bali mumin kavuin, or if they've got a blemish which is never going to heal. Nevertheless, chulkin ve'ochlin, they can get a piece. They get their piece and they can consume it. Aval lo makrivim, but they can't do the avoda, as we said, right? A balmum is apostle avoda, right? Kol she'eno roi la'avoda, any kohen who cannot do the service, right? Eno cholek bebasar. He can't get a piece of the meat. Now that sounds like a contradiction to what we just said, so don't worry about that. If you picked up and as soon as you got confused by that, then you were paying attention. The kol she'en lo babasar, ein lo ba'oros. Also, any kohen who was not eligible to take meat is also ineligible in order to get the hide of the animals, to distribute the hides of all the korbanos to the kohanim. He wasn't able to get that. Afilu tamei b'shas zrikas domim, even if the kohen was tamei at the time when they were throwing the blood, tahor b'shas hekter chalavim, but he became tahor by the time they were burning the fats, which again is that night, right? So then eno cholek babasar, he does not get a portion of the meat. Shenamar, because the pasuk says, hamakriv es dam hashlamim, the one who brings the blood of the korban shlamim, ves hachilev mibnei Aaron, and also the fats from the children of Aaron, lo tiyeh shokayamim lemana. He is the one who gets the right hind leg as a present. So therefore, he has to be eligible to do the service, to throw the blood specifically. Therefore, if he's tamei at the time of the blood throwing, even if it becomes tohar later on, he cannot get a piece. Okay, says the Gemara. Mina hani mili. What is the source for this? Amar Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish says, Damar Kral, the pasuk says, HaKohen ha'mechate osa yochlena. The pasuk says, as far as eating the korban chatos, the Kohen who is the one who does the sprinkling, Kohen ha'mechate, the one who does the sprinkling of the blood, ochel, he's the one who can eat the meat. She'eno mechate eno ochel. If a Kohen is ineligible for performing the service, he cannot eat. V'she'eno mechate eno, as I just said that. Uklolahu. Now, is that really a rule? V'hare mishmara kula de mechatlin v'ochlin. 1 second. The way that this was done is that you would call in the entire watch, right? They would divide up all the Kohen families into watches, 24 different watches, and everyone would come in for a week of service on a rotation. And when it was your family's week of service, you came. Now, if a korban chatos was brought, anybody from that mishmar, anybody from that watch could get a piece. The pasuk says the Kohen who threw the blood gets the piece. Why is it that we're distributing it amongst all the Kohanim of the watch? So the answer is, Roi lechitui kamrinam. We're saying that the Kohen has to be able to do the blood service, meaning there can't be any psul, any reason why he can't do it. He doesn't actually have to be the one who's doing it, but he has to be one who can do it. Eligible. He has to be eligible, right? He's the eligible downfield receiver. Hare katan, right? So that means that a child, what about a Kohen who's a katan? What about a Kohen who's a child? So de'eno roi lechitoi, he can't do the service. He's not bar mitzvah yet. Ve'ochel, but he can eat kodshim, right? Even though, right? Because the pasuk says male kohanim can eat it. So therefore, a male kohen, even not bar mitzvah, can eat it. Why? He's not roi to do the avoda. Elamai. So what do we have to say? Yochlena. When the pasuk, why does the pasuk say yochlena? Yechal kena. The pasuk uses the words that the one who sprinkles it can eat it. It means that it shall be distributed. So therefore, roi lechitoi cholek, she'eno roi lechitoi eno cholek. Somebody who is a Kohen who is eligible to do the sprinkling of the service, he gets a portion, and one who is not eligible cannot get a portion. Therefore, a child does not get a portion, right? Even though, theoretically, right, he's not eligible for the sprinkling, so he does not get his own portion. Right. Now, what about, now comes Jeff's question. Hare balmum, what about the balmum? He can't sprinkle the blood, vecholek, and he can distribute and nevertheless he gets a portion. So the answer is, that's exception to the rule. Because balmum, rachmana Rabbi, the Torah specifically says that a balmum gets. See, that's the exception. The rule is that you have to be eligible for the service in order to get it, but the Torah says this is an exception. Kol zachar bakohanim l'rabos balmum. All males of the kohanim can eat it, right? But that includes what do you mean all males? And all males. The answer is all males comes to include another type of kohen. The answer is a balmum. Now, ve'ema kol zachar l'rabos tvul yom. Why did you pick, of all the invalid kohanim to be able to get a portion, you picked the balmum? Why not the one who is becoming tahor tonight, the tvul yom? Why not say he gets a piece? So the answer is mistaber balmum havi leila rabuye. It makes sense that if you're going to admit one back in to get a portion, it's going to be the one who's the balmum. Why? Shekain ochel, because he is eligible to eat, like that child was, right? He's eligible to eat. So therefore, well, adrabah tvul yom, and the tvul yom can't eat. So adrabah tvul yom hava leila rabuye. It makes more sense though to give a portion to the tvul yom de leursa michse chazi, because tonight he's going to be 100% eligible, right? This balmum is going to be a balmum tonight also. So the answer is hashta miha lo chazi. Yeah, but right now, at the moment of distribution, he's not. So it doesn't make any difference to be able to say he's better because tonight he'll be better. We don't care about that. Right now, the balmum is better because he can eat and the tvul yom can't. Okay, so now, Rav Yosef Amar, Rav Yosef says, Michti. Okay, let's take a look at our droshos that we say. My yochlena, what do we say the word yochlena means? Yechal kena, right? We don't mean that somebody who does the sprinkling of the blood can eat it, because we said that a child katan can't sprinkle it, but he can eat.
Child katan, which is an underage kid, right?
Correct. He's under the age of pregnancy. He can eat, but he can't sprinkle. We said it means that he doesn't get his own portion. The child kohen can't show up. Now that's how we explain that. So lichtov rachmana yachlekena. So then why doesn't the Torah just say he has to be eligible for doing the service in order to get a piece? My yochlena. Why does it say eat when it doesn't mean eat? Right? Shma mina. So we're going to say that it means roi lachila cholek. He has to be eligible to eat in order to get a portion. Shina roi lachila ina cholek. And if he's not eligible to eat, he doesn't get a portion. That's why we decided balmum was better than the tvul yom. Tvul yom can't eat it, so therefore it would make less sense to include him in distribution. Whereas by a balmum, he can eat. Therefore, we're going to be eligible for distribution. All right, this is a place to.
Beautiful.
Stop here.
Correct.
To be continued, right?
Yes. At 7 p.m. actually, gentlemen.
What? 7?
7. Correct.
Are you kidding me?